Welcome to the Lazy CEO Podcast, where Jim Schlexer, author of Great CEOs Are Lazy and founder of the CEO Project, features compelling experts and topics for CEOs of mid to large-size companies. Now, let's get started with the show.
Today, we're going to talk about kind of a dicey little topic, and you wouldn't think it would be, but it is. And that is the combination of both performance reviews and employee feedback. And they kind of, I think of them as a bit of a yin and yang. But let's just start with the tension around performance reviews, particularly, when, your boss is ready to do your performance review, or, when you were working for somebody. I remember that was kind of a tense period. How am I going to do? Did I have a good year? Not a good year? Did I achieve my goals and not achieve my goals? So forth. And so performance reviews have a lot of stress around them, and not just for the reasons that I indicated, but there are other reasons why they're stressful, frankly, for both parties. And I think people don't like to do them for that reason, both sides. And I'm going to just talk about both performance reviews and feedback. And I want to say, I think of these two as almost the yin and yang of engagement with employees. And if you think about feedback as a more continuous process and a performance review as a more periodic kind of engagement, annual or biannual or whatever your pace is, they kind of work together. At one level, you'd say the feedback over time should aggregate into the performance review. And in fact, one of my rules around performance reviews is there should not be any surprises around performance reviews. Now, we get to the performance review, most of the time my conversation goes about like this. Well, I think you pretty much know where you stand with me, right? And they go, well, yeah. I go, well, let me just review the bidding on where we are and how we think about this. But there is a value in that periodic event, which I'm going to get to in a minute. Having said that, there are some organizations that are eliminating the annual performance review. They're basically saying, if we're doing a good job of continually giving feedback, we don't really need to do a performance review because, like I said, it's a foregone conclusion. You already know what your answer is. I'm going to dispute that a little bit because I think there's sort of a little bit of a formality that's got value in performance review. And if you go back to some of the stuff I've talked about on Gen Zs in particular, they want, millennials want regular feedback. Gen Zs want continuous feedback on how they're doing. So they want it, like if you told them every day, red, yellow, green, or a scale of 1 to 10 or whatever, they would like that actually. This is the generation that grew up with, how many likes did I get on my post and how many friends do I have and how big is my network? And they're constantly measuring themselves for acceptance and how are they performing and where do they fit in the, call it social hierarchy, if you will. And so you can probably not give a Gen Z too much feedback. You could argue they're a little narcissistic because of that, but I think it's just healthy. People that are open to feedback on a regular basis, that's a really healthy behavior. And I've even heard of, many organizations that are, packed with younger people, literally doing feedback after every meeting. Right? We had a meeting. How do we rate it? 1 to 10. There's a system that actually recommends that. If a meeting isn't a 10, we did something wrong. But I think a lot of this boils down to EQ. Your EQ, your awareness of the situation and the impact of your behaviors on other, and the awareness of the individual you are reviewing. In other words, there are some people that are very attuned to their performance and they are constantly checking themselves. Like, how am I doing? Did I do well on that? Did I hit my date? Was that good quality work? And their standards are quite high. These are really easy people to work with. I think the hard ones when we get into feedback are people that do not have a good self-awareness and they do not appraise themselves accurately. And I'll get into that in a little bit, but I always found those extremely difficult when there was a complete mismatch in their view of their performance and my view of their performance, this is when there was just a ton of stress. Frankly, a lot on my side, because I'm like, what am I doing wrong that I've not communicated to this person where they stand? And part of the answer is it's them. They just don't get it. They've got this, little bubble world they're living in, and they view themselves a certain way, and you're not going to penetrate that view of their world. So this misperception of reality is a serious issue. And I'm going to get into how you deal with that in a little bit. But let's just start with kind of the easy standard review model that you'd want to use. And I'm going to do annual, and I'm going to go back and do feedback. And I'll talk about why I think annual is still relatively important. So I want to reframe performance review as a coaching opportunity. And here I'm not trying to make anybody wrong. I'm trying to talk about the good, talk about the bad, and talk about what we're going to do to make them better. That's your standard good to above average performing employee review. So first is, how did you perform against your objectives? Now, before a precursor to this is you as a leader have to set clear objectives, right? Specific, measurable, action-oriented, time-based, achievable. All that has to be true about the objectives. So, get the McGillicuddy account, reprice the Smith account up 15%, and, file all your sales reports on time, whatever the thing is, right? I can see whether you did those things or not. They are very observable, third-party observable. I know if you did them, you know if you did them. So when we sit down and say, did you achieve your specific objectives that we had for you this year? That should be a relatively easy conversation if you did a good job of making them measurable. So we go through the achievements. 1, 2, 3, you got an A on this, a B on this, a C- on this one, whatever it is. I think the second thing that a lot of people miss when they're doing a review is how you got the job done. So they're only focused on the achievement of the item, and they miss the how you did the job. And so I can remember I had one guy working for me, incredibly high performer, always hit his numbers, always hit his metrics, always hit his dates. And he was just a son of a gun to work with. People didn't like working with this guy because he was a jerk. He would break China. He would do whatever. He would always prioritize his work over everybody else's. He wouldn't help people. And so the how he got his work done, while he certainly achieved his objectives, item 1 on the review, if you will, he did a crummy job of how he did his job. And when I think about how, I think about almost a 360 review, right? How does your boss perceive you? So that's me. How do I perceive you in this organization and how you got the job done? Now, there are some people, and this guy was particularly good at it, the one I'm thinking of. He was awesome at sucking up to me. So he looked great to me, and it was very intentional. But when you would talk to his peers, in this case, they were VPs, directors, VPs primarily, they kind of thought the guy was a jerk because he managed up well and sideways horribly. So he didn't build peer relationships, and downward, he was not a great guy either. So he beat the snot out of his people, and, he's just not a great guy to work for. So yeah, hit the numbers, but B, didn't do it in a very great way. And I'm going to say, funny, at times I say, all we need to know, we learned on your first grade report card. And at the very bottom of your first grade report card, it said, works and plays well with others. And the problem is this guy didn't work and play well with others. Like, here we are 30 years later, and we got the same damn problem. So, that is a real issue. How you got the job is a fireable offense, and should be, because that's culture. When somebody does the job in a way that doesn't match your culture, they shouldn't be in your organization over time. This is the brilliant jerk that we talk about that really doesn't belong in your organization. Now, there are organizations where the behaviors I described to this individual, like beat up the employees, do whatever you have to with your peers, suck up to your boss, but always hit your numbers. There are organizations where that is exactly what they want you to do. I know it sounds surprising, but they exist. All for me, right? None for anybody else. Very ruthless kind of environments. He probably would have performed exceptionally well and match the culture in those environments. He didn't in this particular one. So what did you get done? How did you get it done? And then the last one is the developmental needs. And this is where the coaching comes. And it comes out of what objectives did you do well on? Which ones did you do poor on? How did you get the job done? What did you do well? What did you do poorly on there? And then based on that, where do we need some development? And given where you want to go, so this is where the career conversation comes in. You want to be a vice president. Here are the 3 things that you don't have that you need to be a really good vice president. So let's figure out how to get you those things. Maybe one, we need to teach you some financial skills that you don't have. So we're going to send you to school. You need to understand the product development process, which you don't understand. So I'm going to organize a project where you work and maybe lead a small product development project. So you learn how that's done. So that's a very productive, positive, helping you with your career, truly coaching conversation. But you didn't need to go through, did you hit your goals and how did you get it done? I think that's important. And I think the 4th thing you do in a review is after that, what else can I do to help make you successful? And that's a bit of a servant leadership view of the universe, right? I'm here to serve you. I'm here to help make you successful. But it is a really worthwhile question, particularly if they know you're going to ask it. If you just sort of surprise people with it, generally the answer is, well, I don't know, nothing, right? But if you let them know I'm going to ask you that question and they have a little time to think about it, sometimes they come up with 2 or 3 things where, and let me tell you what you're really asking. Please coach me on how to be a better boss for you. That's really what you're asking. You're saying it in a little different way, but they might say, I wish you would give me my assignments a little bit earlier so I have more time to think about it. Okay, good coaching to me, right? That's me doing my job differently to make your job easier. When I come to you with a problem, you're never willing to answer it. I don't understand why. So maybe there's a reason for that. There's dialogue. So anyway, what can I do to help make you more successful is a really good question. Relative to the developmental thing, and I talked about if you want to be X, you need X, Y, and Z. That does go back to needing some level of job description. If what a VP is not really known, it's not written down. There's no way for me to tell you what you need to do to get that job if that's what you want to do in life. And so ideally, you at least have a framework of what a VP does or a director does or a manager does that's different than the level below. So when you coach, you can say, you need to do X, Y, and Z to get that job. And I'm happy to help you get it if they're in that average to above average camp. Let's talk about just the feedback in here. I think the key is to always be very specific in your feedback in the performance review. I'll give you an example of that. If I said, Sharon did a really great job on the CEO Summit this year, which is true, by the way. But if I say, Sharon, that's one kind of feedback to her. Another kind of feedback would be, Sharon, the summit went really awesome. I loved how you took full responsibility for it. I love how you solved problems and didn't bring them to me. You just dealt with it. When it did become a big enough issue, we talked about it and you just solved it. There was never any drama. You organized everybody seamlessly. You did it with good spirit and everybody had a great time as a result. That is very specific feedback about the actions taken and why she's getting the positive feedback, right? So when you're giving feedback, you need to be as specific as you possibly can. Now I'm going to go over to the low performer. So we're going to go through the same, set. Did you hit your objectives? No. Did you get the job done? How did you get it done? Well, A, they didn't get it done. So a little bit irrelevant. But normally speaking, you'll find people that are low performers are very much in the get along camp. They don't actually cause a lot of problems because they want to keep their head below the radar. They know they're a non-performer, most of them. And so they're not going to make waves. So they're going to be very amiable and very sort of in the organization. It's only people that think they earn the right to be a jerk that generally are jerks, like the one I talked about. And then developmental needs. We're probably not going to spend as much time on that because they're not meeting the requirement for the current job. So I'm not going to spend time on what they need to get to the next job. I'm going to spend time on what they need to do to become fully competent in the job they're in because they're not meeting standard. Now, I talked about being specific in feedback. Particularly, this is true when you've got somebody who has low self-awareness. So we probably all had the conversation. hey, Aaron, I'm really not happy with how you're running the application lab. It's just not going the way I think it should. What? I think we're doing great. What do you mean we're not going good? Well, I just like some clients have talked to me and they're not as happy as they could be. And well, none of them have ever talked to me. So all of a sudden now we've got a fight over my data, whether my data on her performance is real or not. And so know that going in a low performance conversation that you need to be incredibly specific, like dates, names, events, when you have a conversation around low performance. So a better conversation with Aaron might be, Aaron, I don't like what's going on in the applications lab. We have not made a single date commitment for delivery to a client in the last 6 months. Here's the scorecard. You might have been late by at least 3 weeks on every single commitment that you've made. There are 10 jobs that have been in there for 6 months. You still haven't even touched them. And that affects our sales and our revenue if we can't do the application engineering. And that is a giant problem. So now I've been very specific, right? It's quantifiable, it's observable. Now, I'll tell you that 9 times out of 10, we're going to go into excusegram city here, which is, wow, geez, Jim, you don't realize the salespeople don't get me the data, and that's why I can't do my job. And if they only did their job, I could do my job. And I like to think, one of my rules of thumb is high performers give answers, low performers give excuses. So if we're in that mode, you're clearly dealing with a low performer. And now we're in this dogfight of like, are they really a low performer? Are they not a low performer? Is the data real? Is that because of other people? And it's a very, like I said, for me, very stressful scenario because I'm like, now I got to justify my thinking. I've got to give all this data to support in somebody who I know is not hitting the numbers anyway. I don't really want to spend a lot of time on them, frankly. But you are going to go there. So be specific in the conversation. At some point, you got to say, listen, I understand that you perceive this differently, but that is how I perceive your performance. And so I need you to figure out how you're going to make this better. So don't make it your problem, make it their problem. And the ultimate is we're going to go to that's a generic, you need to get better in some very specific areas, the areas I gave you feedback on. The now we're getting really negative, we're going to go into a performance improvement plan, and I'll set you go, these numbers are unacceptable. They need to all get green and on time within the next 3 months. If they don't, we're going to have a very short conversation and it's going to involve you exiting the organization. So now we're on a performance improvement plan, right? Which is more severe than just a negative feedback kind of conversation. So that's the development. So why do I think it's important to do that, even if I'm giving continuous feedback? Because we're going to document this. And we're going to write it down. Here's how you did. Here's what you didn't do. Here's the development plan. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you're going to do. And you're going to have them sign, not that they agree, but that they have received it. Okay. And the reason that's important for later, I'll talk about why in a minute. It's important that they've received it because particularly when it's a positive one, well, sure, of course I agree. You think I'm amazing because I do too, right? But if I give you a negative feedback, many people will not sign that they agree because they don't. But you can get them to sign that they have seen it. And that's important. The reason why it's important is if you do end up terminating that person, you want a paper trail that says, hey, we had multiple conversations about this person's performance. Here are the documents. She received them or he received them. And that's why they got terminated. It was not a surprise. We were completely clear what was going on. And that's why they got terminated. And so the annual review forces that documentation discipline that if you ever end up in a litigious situation, you're going to be super happy you've got it. As opposed to normal, regular feedback. Hey, Laura, I really love how you did that marketing piece. I thought the colors popped. I think it was super clear. It was one of the best pieces we've ever done. And I know the clients are going to love it. Okay, great feedback. No documentation, my memory, her memory. Or if I say, geez, that website that you put together, it really wasn't your best work. There were a lot of typos in it. The colors were horrible. The flow of the way you click through it just didn't work. It didn't really present the company well. And I know you can do better, but that just wasn't your best work. So negative feedback, looking for improvement. Again, not documented. And so if I terminated anybody and all the conversations I had were those kind of conversations, I've got a he said, she said, or who slapped John conversation, and nobody knows. So I remember it one way, they remember it another way, and now we got a problem on our hands. Lawyers love those scenarios. First of all, because they could charge you a lot of money and they can create doubt and uncertainty, which gives them an opening. So how do you give feedback? Now, I am not a fan of one of the models that's out there. I'll make it PG-13. The poop sandwich is what they talk about, right? So you give positive feedback, negative feedback, positive feedback, right? That's the poop sandwich. Bread, poop, bread. And I'm not a fan of that because it's so, now some people like it because it softens the blow, right? They go, gee, Jim, I really like how you did that last project. It really turned out great, but I got to say this project, a lot of typo, blah, 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 blah. But, I know you can do great work and I really appreciate you being around here and everybody loves working with you, right? There's a poop sandwich, a really simple one. I think it softens the negative feedback in a way. It's the wimp's way out to give direct feedback. And therefore I don't like it because it softens it and you lose. Because watch the selective hearing work, right? Gee, I talked to Jim the other day. He loved what I did on that other project. And he told me everybody loves working with me. Totally forgot the typos and the miss on the middle project. Like, that went away. They never heard it, right? So just be careful. Selective hearing works. And so if you give them options of what to hear, they're going to hear what they want to hear. So I think the concept I like here, and I think this is really important, and this was introduced to me by Julie Walker, one of our partners. There's a book written by a woman named Kim Scott by the name of Radical Candor. Radical Candor. And this kind of makes sense, but there are, it's the classic consultant's grid, right? Two axes. One axis is how much you care about people. I care a lot, I care a little at the bottom. And then the left-right axis is how direct you are. Are you challenging? Are you okay with confrontation? And we'll just run around the boxes that get created by that grid. If you're high caring and you will not be direct, you're super indirect, you will not tell somebody how they're doing, they call this ruinous empathy. I'm empathetic. I know how you feel. I don't want anybody to feel bad. It's all about the team. We're a family here. Da, da, da. And never was heard a discouraging word, as the song goes, right? It's ruinous because nobody actually knows where they stand or how they're doing or anything, and they can't get better. If you don't care, and you are, if you don't care and you are indirect, like you won't, they call it manipulative insincerity. So I don't actually care about you, and I'm not going to tell you what I think. You are just manipulating people. You're playing chess pieces with people, moving them around the board for your delight. It's almost psychopathic in my book, that I would do that to somebody, but there are people like this, they like to keep people guessing. They won't tell them the rules of the game, and they won't be direct. In fact, we just recently dealt with a company where the leader was like that, and it is a tough environment because performance is not the coin of the land. Your relation with the CEO and how much butt you've kissed is the coin of the land, and that's just not productive. Moving over to the being direct, being willing to challenge. If I challenge, I'm highly challenging, I'm willing to be direct, but I don't care about people. I have no compassion for people. They call it obnoxious aggression. I call it just being a jerk, right? Like people that just lay it in, they're super direct, and they don't give a damn about the people. They are really hard to be around. I mean, sometimes they say something worth hearing, but they're like prickly. They're just hard to be around, and where you want to be. And Kim Scott talks about this. You read the whole book on it. I'm giving a super short version, but is upper right-hand corner. I care about people. I genuinely care what happens to the people, and I'm willing to be direct. It's like if you were out with your significant other and they had brought for dinner and they had a piece of spinach stuck in their teeth. Would you say something to them? Well, yeah, you would. Well, you're being direct about something that's kind of embarrassing. Hey, sweetie, you got spinach stuck in your teeth. And I don't want to spend the whole meal looking at it, by the way, but you're being direct, but it's coming from a place of love, right? I care about this person. I don't want them to look like a buffoon with spinach in their teeth. So I say something to them. I'm direct to them because I care, not because I don't care. And so the same thing with your employees. I tell people, they go, what's the opposite of love? And people go, hate. No. Opposite of love is apathy. I don't care. I can't even be bothered. And if you've ever gone down like kind of I'm breaking up with this person, this relationship is not working. Hate and love are very, very high energy states. Apathy is a low energy state. So if I don't care about you, I'm apathetic. I won't even bother telling you got spinach in your teeth because I don't care. Even if I'm direct, I might not do it. So it's that combination. So when I give feedback in the review, I genuinely want you to be successful. I'm giving you feedback with the goal of making you even more successful in achieving your goals in life. And that's, if you come at it from that spirit, it's hard for people to get mad at you for giving feedback. So think about, am I demonstrating compassion with my directness? And if you're not being direct, you need to get a little more direct. And if you're not being compassionate, you at least need to demonstrate that at some level. So think about that as you're giving feedback, both ongoing, continuous feedback. And so on that basis, let me go back to the poop sandwich. Shielding the directness in niceness is, as I said, it is not radical candor. I'd rather have you say, hey, Jim, I want to give you some direct feedback. And here it is, the last project, typos all over the place, not your best work. I thought you were really distracted, and I'm concerned. That is super direct. You cannot hide from it. I didn't tell you people like working with you. There's no selective hearing option. There's only one piece of feedback, right? And so I like the radical candor one piece of feedback model over the poop sandwich, which a lot of people recommend. So Jim's opinion. So, but it's worked for me. And usually when I go into those conversations, I will ask for permission, even if they work for me. I'll go, are you open to some direct feedback? And they'll go, 9 times out of 10, yeah, I'm open to it. I go, great. On that note, let me just share this with you, being direct and open. Sometimes people, I don't want to hear it, which is, by the way, a massive red flag if they say that. But asking for permission, it shows compassion, right? So that's maybe one technique. All right. Let me just end on, when we go down the negative path with somebody, right? So we've given them negative feedback, and even more, we put them on a performance improvement plan with specific and measurable improvements and dates that it must happen by, or else we terminate them. I'm an optimist. I always do it. I'm always optimistic that maybe they're going to be successful at turning around. Unfortunately, I've got a career of experience that says it's an extremely low probability event. We do it because we're human. We do it to be humanistic with people, have care, have compassion, give them a chance. Unfortunately, as leaders, we've got to go into that not expecting a 50-50 probability of success. It's something lower than that, maybe materially lower, depending on the individual. So just realize that as you do reviews. So that's kind of performance reviews. I think feedback as regular and continuous and specific as you can, only on the topic. Don't make the poop sandwich. That's not productive. Nobody likes poop sandwiches. Performance review, yes, even though there's a move against them currently. And I do it so you and I can document our state at that moment. And so I've got a little bit of a file if there's ever a problem, particularly with low performers, file. Particularly with low performers, extremely specific, date-based, measurable, third-party observable data on their performance, because they will fight. The fish is going to fight before you are able to convince them that they've got a problem. In many cases, once in a great while, you get somebody with very high EQ, and you go, hey, I think you really could have done better on that project. And you go, you're right, could have. And you know what? Here's what was going on. And here's why I screwed it up. And I fixed those things. And I think I'm going to try to do better going forward. And hopefully you haven't seen a reoccurrence of that since that time. No, I haven't. Yeah, no, I realized I was not hitting the mark and I fixed it. And I think hopefully I'd love to hear feedback because I think I've got it fixed. But if you don't think I have, I want to hear that. That's somebody who dropped below the performance standard. and wants to get back up, right? That's a real good marker for it. I think that's most of it on, the basics around sort of feedback and performance reviews, sort of the do's and don'ts, some guideposts on what you should have in your performance review, about documentation on it, high performers, low performers. And I wish you good luck. It's never an easy thing. It's something that we, particularly if you're on the less direct scale of that directness scale, it's not comfortable. But I think we have an obligation as leaders to tell them where they stand, good, bad, and different, so that they can correct. And if you don't, then shame on us. On that note, thanks for joining us on the Lazy CEO podcast. We'll see you next time. Be good. This podcast is brought to you by the CEO Project. At the CEO Project, we work with CEOs to help them grow their business. And our members represent billions of dollars of revenue and profit. And frankly, amongst all of us, we've probably made every mistake in the book, including some you haven't made yet. So if you want to learn from the experience of a bunch of really seasoned CEOs, we're a great place to hang out. In this podcast, what you're going to hear are some of those ideas, concepts, and things that are just going to help you on your journey. If you want to find out more, reach out to us at theceoproject.com, or you can contact me personally at jim@theceoproject.com. Happy listening.
Thanks for listening to the Lazy CEO podcast. We'll see you next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes, and check out our website, www.theceoproject.com.